We always say seat time is king, so sit on down and listen in to Motorsports Tech Talk with your hosts, Brian and Eric. Eric, how's it going?
Pretty sweet. You know, always a good weekend when you get to tool around on a mini bike and then angrily rip some old wiring out of another car. So, good times.
Yeah, we got to hang out and work on the Conquest a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, disassembly is always definitely the easiest and also
Yes.
the most fun part. I got to stop taking things apart and start actually putting them together. But it's still, there's always more things to take apart. It seems like, especially when you just keep buying cars like I do.
Yeah, you have quite a few cars.
Yeah, maybe some would say too many, but
Haters.
they're just haters. But so we made a little bit of progress there. We were kind of limited by our toes freezing from this amazing weather.
Yeah. I think I've said it before on this podcast, but fuck Michigan.
It seems like the Michigan weather is getting to everyone this weekend. I think there's snow in Oklahoma and Texas and everything right now, and they're getting like below freezing, big accidents, lots of crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's never good. 100-car pile up in Michigan, or in Texas, sorry. Dallas, I think.
Yep. It's not good, but yeah, hopefully it starts warming up because I don't know how much more I can take of this.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. It sucks. Like, snow itself isn't bad. I like snow. I can deal with cold too. But it's just all of it. It's more humid and cold, at least compared to Colorado, obviously. And there's salt everywhere and everything rusts. And there's nothing to fucking do because it's flat as shit. So, you're just losing half your life over the winter. Yeah. Yep. There's stuff to do if you keep buying things, right? You can buy a snowmobile and buy a jet ski and buy this and that, but
yeah, just or take a lot of flights to warmer places, or or more mountainous places.
Yeah, just keep leaving and it's fine. Don't spend your time here, and the winter here is great.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. But well, today we were thinking of doing maybe a little different, different episode. I mean, similar but different. So
same.
We're gonna talk about combination of things we hear online, things maybe our friends we've had arguments about, like just things that we thought we'd just have a little chat about and go back and forth on, that are kind of near and dear to our hearts. So
yes. Yeah. Should be fun, a little less serious, probably closer to a shitpost, but
Yeah, so I think our first topic. So this was an argument that happened back in the office when we were all at Pratt & Miller.
And back in those
days. And basically the way it would go is someone would talk about how, torque doesn't matter. It's all about horsepower. I mean, I think the saying, there's a saying, right? Like torque wins races, horsepower, something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what saying you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't remember. There's a saying, but whatever it is, they're kind of on the opposite end of it, seems like. But basically, their argument would be that torque doesn't matter. It's just horsepower. Horsepower wins races. Torque, I don't know, pulls your trailer, something.
Yeah.
But
so my fundamental issue with this, right, is that they're directly related, right? So horsepower, and the numbers I'm going to use, I guess, relate to empirical units, so foot-pounds and horsepower. But power equals torque times RPM divided by 5252, right? That's it. Very straightforward, very easy. So if you gave me power at a certain RPM, I could give you that torque. And if you gave me torque at a certain RPM, I could give you the power. It's not like, I don't know.
Yeah, the horsepower is derived from the torque. So if you have more torque at a given RPM, you also have more horsepower at that
Yes.
given RPM.
Yes.
So, but I think kind of the crux of the argument that they were trying to get to was maybe more comparing, say, an engine that makes 800 horsepower, 800 foot-pounds, but only revs to 5,000 RPMs, and one that makes revs to 10,000 RPM, so makes same horsepower, but then basically half the torque, or at least peak torque. And I guess so they would prefer the higher revving, I guess lower torque one, but I don't know. That's a different argument, because then you start getting into maybe like, well, what kind of gear ratios are you using? Like
Well, if you, I guess, dial it back before you need to care about gear ratios, and if you have two separate engines and just based off of how high they can rev, so we're comparing a diesel to, your S2000 or whatever, right? If the S2000 has more power and you're talking about like a drag strip, it's going to win, right? But this idea that horsepower is all that matters is strictly like a VMAX condition, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the problem is. The more torque, or the torquier, quote, so to speak, engine, that, just doesn't rev as high. It'll beat the other car off the line, probably. And then all of a sudden you care about inertia and weight and all that other shit. But, in the first 5 feet, torquey guy will win. But in a VMAX condition, the higher horsepower engine will win. But at least in road racing, the kind of stuff we talk about, the concern is that you're not always at the optimal spot. There's traffic.
Mm-hmm.
You have to slow down. Maybe it's not enough to downshift, but it really kind of puts you at a shitty spot in your rev range. So now, you're trying to make a pass and you're in an unideal position. That's when you want what's described as the torquier engine. What it really means is at that RPM, it's going to have more fucking power. But
yeah,
that's where it, comes from, I guess, in my mind.
Yeah. I mean it's I guess if you have too much, you can have too much torque for sure. Sure, if you don't have enough tire grip, you don't have if you don't have enough grip, you're not gonna be able to put. Again, you can say torque or horsepower, just how you want to convert it. You can have too much horsepower at an RPM or too much torque at an RPM. I mean, they're all related directly to each other. But, if you came out of a corner with your turbo car and you have it, it has some like boost creep issues and just shoots up to like 35 PSI, like it's probably just going to freaking, roast those tires coming out. And that's when you don't want low end torque in that case. But if your tires can handle it, and go all in, start over boosting coming out of corners just so you can shoot out of them quicker, and then maybe you start lowering at higher RPMs to keep the efficiency of the turbo from falling off too much. But just, I don't know, I always thought it was a weird argument. Like maybe if you're just talking like the kind of VMAX or even like drag racing condition, where if you have all this torque, you're probably just going to spin up the rears anyway. you just need that top end horsepower, which is where you're going to, tune your torque converter and your, 2-speed trans, or
Right.
your slipper clutch on your top fuel dragster, or,
Yeah, I
your,
mean, it's I guess a good way to think about it in terms of road racing, where you're not necessarily grip limited, is if we you look at two GT4 cars, right? If we look at a flat 6-cylinder like a Porsche, revs to like 8,000 RPM, and you compare it to a Camaro, right? Your big old V8. Coming out of a corner, let's say turn 7 at Road Atlanta, because Trump Car was just there, and maybe that track is fresh in people's mind. But you come out of this corner right before a long straight. If you come out of it poorly, you in the Porsche, you need to get those ripums up and get in your power band. And if they're not up, again, you come out of it poorly, then the person with, quote, more torque, which really means more power at the lower RPM, is going to pass you. But by the time you get to the end of that very long straight, right, if they don't quite make the pass, by the time you get to the end of that very long straight, they're not going to pass you, because the Porsche's on par with power, right? There's BOP, they're all similar. So you're not getting passed at the end of the straight because you got the power. But again, that's as you're approaching your VMAX condition. It's just always, and then, so again, thinking about a road race condition, that puts a lot more pressure on the driver in the car with less torque, because you can't really screw up that corner exit. Or, if you do, it's going to be a lot easier for other people to take advantage of it. Right. So when you hear someone talk about a torquey engine, they're really just describing where the power band is for that engine.
Yeah.
So that's all it really means.
Yeah, but I do think there is still some more to that argument of, because I mean, you can't just take an engine that makes 800 horsepower and just say, okay, now I want it to also make 800 foot-pounds of torque. Usually there's a trade-off. Intake runner length, exhaust runner length. There's, the design of the cylinder head ports and the size of the valves, and there's just, or your turbo sizing if you're force injected or force inducted.
Supercharger.
Yeah, your supercharger volume and size and pulley, ratio and all this stuff. So there's with everything, there's usually trade-offs. So if you, I guess, have the opportunity to build the more peaky engine versus the more low-end engine, I think it does depend on it definitely depends on what you're doing. So
Right.
in like an endurance racing situation, I think you would want the torqueier engine. You'd want something that is good in traffic, can come out of the corner if you get stuck behind someone, can have good kind of launch off that corner quick, and either get alongside or at least get back into the draft right away. So on the long straight, you can get a little extra on there by keeping in the draft, basically. So, and like you said, if it lends more to maybe less experienced drivers that might make some mistakes and not carrying good speed through the corner, it gives them an opportunity to still get some good acceleration out, and avoid being passed and everything. Whereas if all of the engine only is really working at the very high RPMs, then it's going to be good at the end of the straight, but maybe if you messed up the corner before, you can't get up to that high RPM.
Right.
And then also you start talking about gearing, like if we specifically talk Champ Car, most cars people are racing are older and just have 5-speed manuals, and that fifth gear is going to be super mega overdrive for the highway mileage back in the day. But now that you're racing it, it's that leaves you a lot of times with a usable gear of 3 and 4, and for the longer tracks a little bit of fifth, but Yeah, it's not much to work with, and if your engine only is happy at the higher end, it's you're going to spend really a lot of the time at those lower RPMs most likely. And then if you have more torque, it gives you the opportunity to not have to downshift at certain points that maybe can kind of throw off the driver. So
Right.
I think, again, like with really any argument, there's not really always a right and wrong answer. I mean, it's definitely wrong to just say I need torque and not horsepower because they both just happen at the same time. You know, that they're both dependent on each other.
Yes.
But uh, but as far as choosing, trying to design your engine or your drivetrain for it, optimizing it for certain applications, that you're gonna want to know what you're looking for and
Right.
what kind of tire grip you have, what kind of drivers will be driving, what kind of tracks are you going to be going to, what kind of gear ratios are available to you. So, there's definitely a lot that goes into it, but specifically talking track racing stuff, I think, especially where you're going to be doing a lot of passing, you're gonna want more torque, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. With the passing, if you're going for time attack, then fuck it. You know, rev to the moon and have no torque, right? If no one's going to be in your way and you're confident in your abilities to, keep the engine where it needs to be in terms of RPM, then yeah, it doesn't matter. If you can get a little more power, um, then do that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of, in professional racing, a lot of times, they don't really even get to choose it, but it kind of torque chooses them, because a lot of times for balance of performance, there's going to be restrictors added, which are just basically going to cut off that high end the most and potentially actually improve the low end a little bit by increasing the air velocity at low RPMs, and then of course eventually stalling it, choking it out at the high. So kind of by necessity, they need to tune for kind of lower end performance because of that restrictor.
mm-hmm.
And then in the case of boosted balance of performance vehicles, if you look at like the boost tables that they allow them to have, a lot of times that the boost really trails off at the high end. So ultimately, a lot of those race cars are going to be that kind of, at least endurance racing cars are going to be tuned that way. So, it's in that case, it's not because they decided that was the fastest way around the track. It was more that's how the series decided to balance them. So
Right.
And that's part of the reason why at least up till the C7, the V8 in those was only 2 valves per cylinder, which you'd kind of be like, you'd just be thinking like, how the heck, like freaking my Corolla has 4 valves per cylinder. Like every car since like late 80s, early 90s, any little grocery getter car is 4 valves per cylinder. So like how could they get away with 2 valves? Well, the restrictor they found that they didn't need the extra airflow from adding the additional valves, which gives you a little more, potentially more valve open area. They just found with the restrictor they didn't need it, and they would rather simplify, reduce the parts, reduce friction, reduce weight. And since at the end of the day it's all balance of performance out, then they really don't have to worry too much.
Right.
So
Yeah, for the most part, you don't have to worry. Sometimes you can make a car so awful that the other cars can't be reined in with bop. But
yeah, or they can't push you up enough.
yeah,
So yeah, it's definitely an interesting discussion, but yeah, you could just go on and on about different kind of nuances of it. But I guess kind of related to torque versus horsepower.
Speaking of no torque and kind of actually no power, recently I've seen a lot of people saying the Miata is a momentum car, which is true. So, boom. Moving on. Next subject. That's
No. Okay. This whole momentum car thing, or he drives Miatas a lot, so he's a good momentum driver. So if you put him in a Corvette, he's going to be faster than the other guys in Corvettes.
Yeah.
but that's so Eric, let me ask you here. So when you drive a car, right,
Yes.
on a track,
Mm.
do you try to keep the maximum amount of speed through a corner as possible, or do you purposely try to overbrake just to stop all the Miatas behind you from passing you and then gun it on the straight?
Yeah, dude. In the Cadillac, fuck those Miatas. We just talked about this. I got that V8 with all the torque. Over slow a bit. You know, you can do it in a Camaro too.
Yeah, but if you were to say actually take the corner correctly, trail brake in, hit the apex, accelerate out perfectly, you would just gap the Miata and you never see them.
Yeah. So the concept, I don't think, is hey, you're trying to keep your minimum corner speed up. It's more of a relationship of based off the car, how important that minimum corner speed is. Right. With a Miata, you've got
Yeah.
dick all. You know, the benefit is it's a lightweight, so you can have a high corner speed. And that's it. Like if you screw up, you don't have any power to help regain that speed. You're just kind of boned. So for the Miata, it's a momentum car because by necessity, you know, you need to keep that minimum corner speed up. Whereas the CTSV or any, and not Miata really, yeah, you have the same goal, but it's a lot more forgiving. So at least when you're talking about drivers, like you mentioned, some guy coming out of spec Miata into another car, they're better at it because they pay a higher penalty for it.
Yeah, so I mean you kind of said it yourself when you said if you mess up in the corner, then you're going to be you need to maintain the momentum. But how about you just not mess up in any car? Like I said, if you're stuck behind some guy with more horsepower than you, I get it. I understand the situation that people are kind of talking about. It's you're at the track day or you're at a champ car race and you're stuck behind this Mustang and your Miata, and you can't get by him because you need to your lap time. A lot of your lap time comes from taking the corners faster than they can, and they're just very slow in the corners. But my argument is you should be able to make that Mustang nearly as fast in a corner with the right tires, with enough tire. Yes, it's going to be heavier, but potentially you can make it corner nearly as well as a Miata. And if it does that, then it's just going to be faster everywhere. It's just going to be faster. I think it's more.
So you're cheating the argument because now you're just talking about faster cars. Like no shit, a DPI car is faster than a GT3 car. Like, oh wow, it's faster in the corners and has more power. Wow, it's faster. No shit. I think the point is just the importance and how the importance of different is stressed, throughout different platforms.
So I mean I understand with like so you say you take you take a 400 horsepower Mustang and a 200 horsepower Miata, or I guess more realistically, a 100 horsepower Miata and a 200 horsepower Mustang in in a champ car situation. So that should be roughly. I mean, let's just make the numbers easy. And then of course the Miata weighs 2,000 pounds, the Mustang weighs 4,000 pounds. So their power to weight's the same, but one has a lot more horsepower, and then you start getting the lift to drag and all this stuff. But I mean, those should do about the same lap time. But of course, the Mustang's gonna be slower in the corners. It's gonna have more mass. I mean, honestly, it should be slower overall because of we've talked about this in a previous episode, the tire load sensitivity. But say maybe you equalized maybe you added 20 more horsepower to compensate for that. So ultimately, these are doing the same lap time, but because of the mass is reducing the tire grip as you increase that load, then the Mustang does have less grip in the corners, but it has a little more power to weight coming out. So I agree that in that instance, you're going to get stuck. the Miata will get stuck behind the Mustang because you will not be able to, unless you make some super, uh, aggressive move and dive bombs them to get them out of position and then blocks them all the way up the straight. It's basically going to be almost impossible for the Miata to pass, without some traffic or anything getting in the way. So
Damn, son, it sounds to me like you're saying all the Miata's lap time comes from momentum.
no, what I'm saying is you need if you're going to endurance race, you need more power because then you can easily pass people and never get stuck.
So, just to summarize a bit, the Miata is a momentum car, but you think it's a bad platform for champ car.
I mean, I guess answer your first point, kind of. Answer to your second point, yes. Now, I think the Miata is great to drive, and it's going to be fun for your team. But and specifically talking champ car, I mean, limited. You're a little bit limited by fuel capacity, and yes, you have to. If you're driving a race like at Road Atlanta or Watkins Glen, where it's just super super busy, lots of cars, you got to keep passing them to get your lap time. I mean, yeah, I feel that you'd be better off with some, big horsepower car that, it still should handle well. I mean, you can't just show up with something that has 400 treadwear tires on it and just almost rolls over in the corners. Like if you can make, I mean, having driven the Van Buren boys Ultima at a few races, I mean, the car runs with RE71s at least in the last few events. And there were plenty of times where, like at the infield at Daytona, going through the regular turns, not the big banked ones, I was able to pass Miatas on the outside with this giant Ultima. Of course, that's some of the Miatas. There's going to be fast Miatas, slow Miatas. I mean, they can vary widely, but I mean, I was taking my very much so not defined as a momentum car, and I was carrying momentum right around the outside of these Miatas that you would think would be able to brake and turn better. But
well, I mean, they probably could. It
case.
just sounds like shitastic driving.
Yes, it could definitely be driver mod. I agree. So, I just hate the idea of like there's momentum good at momentum drivers. That's what you call a good driver. If you're a bad at momentum, I can only drive Mustangs. Like, well, you can only drive Mustangs slowly. Is that what you're saying? Like, you can't handle a Miata? Like, I don't know. I think the goal here is for us to maintain momentum, as much momentum as possible through every corner and every part of the track. So
yeah, that's a good goal. Just some cars will be able to do more. That's all. But
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, but I understand the frustration having driven the GWR E30, which is on the other end of like that momentum car versus horsepower car, kind of between the Ultima and the E30. They're kind of on the exact opposite ends of the spectrum. The E30 was set up with maximum aero, maximum tire, as little weight as possible, whereas the Ultima was basically maximizing power, of course still reducing weight as much as possible for better acceleration and handling, but it's still front wheel drive and it's still not going to probably handle as well as an E30 can, especially when it has a bunch of aero on it. And yeah, I mean, there were times where, depending on the track, you'd get behind someone and your lap time goes down like 5-6 seconds a lap, whereas with the Ultima, you just, for the most part, you're either as fast as people through the corners or a little bit slower for the most part. And then once you get to the straight, you just hit the go pedal and you're gone. And you don't even have to, I mean, they can try to block you, I guess, but you can find a way by, or they're going to just get black flag for blocking you down the straight or something. But
lame.
So I get it. I get the what people are trying to get to here, but I just hate the whole, this is a momentum car. Like every car, if you want to go fast, every car should be a momentum car. You should be.
But some cars it matters to more than others. right? Isn't that what
No,
we just said? You can put a shit
well,
driver in a Mustang, in Chump Car, and they might be able to keep up with someone who's a better driver in a Miata because that car's strength is, not through the corner, whereas that's the only place you can make lap time in the Miata.
well, but that's when a car is, if the car is just, say in that example that I gave where it has like a little more than 200 horsepower to make up for the load sensitivity of the tire versus the 100 horsepower Miata, then yes, I mean, or no, and I feel like in that situation, if the driver is 5% worse than the Miata driver, then he's still going to be able to get by because he's just that much faster. But if now, I think what the situation you're trying to talk about is the Mustang has like 300 horsepower, so he's way faster in the straight. So yeah, he can drive like absolute crap, and then
No, I mean,
just
it's
hit the
not
go pedal.
necessarily dog shit, but, if, um, so far until now, when we were making the comparisons, we were talking about maximizing minimum corner speed, which if you can do that, you're driving it perfectly, right? So same scenario of having a perfect driver in a Miata and then subtract 3 to 5% from driver skill and put them in a higher power car. They're not going to lose so much around the corner that they can't just pass them on the next straight.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is when we, I guess, get a little into the weeds of, yeah, what track, how long is the straight, exactly what is the power of the car. But I mean,
But I mean,
but
without getting into the weeds, it's all really, to me, it's all about the comparison of where the car's strength is and how to make it go fast, right? The only way to make a Miata go fast is corner speed,
yeah,
especially
I mean,
compared
if
to higher horsepower cars, right? Like that's just,
I mean, yeah, so I mean, yeah, but if you added horsepower to the Miata, it would just be
but you're
faster.
not,
I don't know,
is
like,
the thing, right? That's what makes it a momentum car is you're not. If you show up with a boosted K-swap Miata, I'm not going to call that a momentum car, right? Because that's
you're not.
no.
What if you're then racing your boosted K swap Miata against a boosted Mustang? Is it still the momentum car?
Well, I guess it depends on the Mustang now, right? If it's a GT500, I guess yeah, one of them still has like 300 more horsepower than the other. But
But then you take that K swap turbo Miata and put it up against a spec Miata. Now the spec Miata is going to be the momentum car. Of course, I don't think
yes,
the spec Miata will
especially
ever
with
see
splits.
the spec Miata will ever see the K Miata with a turbo and everything ever again, because it should just fly off into the distance, I would hope.
Yes.
But I mean, I don't understand calling a Miata a momentum car. I mean, you could call a Mustang a momentum car if you're driving it fast.
If you're racing a Fox body against a new GT500, then yeah, the Fox body is now the momentum car. It's a
So
comparison
it's
phrase.
relative. It's a
Yes.
relativity.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's where we're getting to the. I think that's where I could start to agree with you. It's comparing two things, but just saying universally a Miata is a momentum car.
Well, I feel
I just
like now
it's
we can, it's widely accepted that Miatas, everything has more power than a Miata.
yeah,
Your
basically.
fucking Camry has more power than a Miata. So in the comparison against the world, where one car just always is at the bottom, you can kind of hand wave and just call it the momentum car, because no matter what you compare it against, it's the you know
Yeah, I guess globally, on average, it's the momentum car. When you compare two cars,
yes.
it's going to come out the momentum car more often than not. Okay. So, but I guess the part that annoys me the most is just the whole like, because I drive a Miata, I'm better at momentum, and I'm just put me in a F1 car, and I'm just going to be able to be faster than the guy who drives the Mustang at the track day. Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
If you're a fast driver, you should be fast in whatever car you're in. I mean, I would agree that say racing in Spec Miata is a great way to kind of hone your racecraft and you know, be fast. But if you're not maintaining momentum in your Spec Miata, well, the guys in the Spec Miatas that are maintaining their momentum will be winning.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely. If you suck at driving in a Spec Miata, just because you're in a Miata doesn't mean you're a quote momentum driver. You know,
yeah,
you just suck, right?
yeah. So
But I think some of that also comes from the concept that, you know, low powered cars, or anything, you know, the bikes or, well, I guess that's about it. That's probably all you put on track. Um, is a good learning tool because again, you know, if you scrub off too much corner speed, you're kind of bummed. You know, you've
yeah,
got 20 seconds until the next corner to think about it because you're going so slow.
yeah. And honestly, what I would start to argue is that the driver of the higher powered car has to be better to get the full lap time out of it, because most of the cars I've driven in Champ Car at least, and then also my Spec Miata, it's you can be pretty much kind of on off switch on the throttle. Like as soon as you're ready to exit the corner, you're going full throttle and you're not going to spin. I remember one time I spun the tires on my Spec Miata in second gear coming up turn 5 at Pittsburgh, and I thought something broke or something on the car because I was like, what is this?
What just
What is
happened?
this wheel spin? What just happened? But I think if you then take a car that's 400 horsepower and race it in Champ Car and try to get really fast lap times, and I feel like you'd have to be a lot better because you need to manage that throttle. You have to try to keep the speed up in the corner, and you're probably dealing with a lot more weight of the vehicle. So making sure you're getting the load transfer right and the brake zones and trail braking. And I don't know. I feel like a very low power and low grip car, or I guess high power, low power, high grip car is going to be very easy to drive. Whereas a high power, medium grip car that's going to start. If you don't have traction control and everything, that's where I think the skill starts coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there with skill, right? Certainly I would say the lower powered car, high grip, will tell the driver a lot more significantly when they're screwing up, right? Like, hey, you can get on throttle a lot sooner. You know, you don't need nearly as much brake. I think it overlays that, or relays that, I guess, to the driver much better. So I kind of agree, but I think there's a huge driver mod variable in there, right?
Yeah.
Just because I think to get 10/10 out of anything is difficult, but you know, if you compare a pro's time to an amateur's time in like a GT3 car, which all of a sudden now we're talking about more grip, I get, it's a lot closer than in slower cars. So, you know, it might be harder maybe to drive the slower car fast. Again, now there's driver aids that we're talking about, or some. Yeah, I just think now talking about this, there's too much of a driver mod thing to unpack. But
Yeah.
I guess, well, because the thing is, I guess, like the GT2 class, right? The new class, the car is made to have a low corner speed, lots of power, minimal aero. You know, it's targeted at amateur, you know, and gentleman drivers who want to go faster. But, you know, it'll be a little bit safer because you have lower corner speed. I think that'll be easier to get closer to a pro's time at than, you know, something that maybe doesn't have quite as much power. again, they're still not going to get the pros time, but they'll get closer. So ratio wise, maybe it's easier. But again, like I said, the lower power car, I think personally, like in my experience, communicates when you've screwed up so well to you that, it's probably the best learning tool for that anyway, for that specific application. So
I mean, I think
there's a lot to.
I think lower power cars are good learning tools because then you're going slower when you make that mistake. A lot less energy there. But I don't know. I guess in my experience watching champ car races, I just noticed a lot of maybe the really, really fast champ cars that maybe because of kind of how the champ car rules are and different handling mods are kind of restricted. A lot of times those cars are going to have maybe more power than a lot of the field. But then they still have similar tire grip and maybe they don't have any points for aero. So the cars are going to be less stable at those sustained higher speeds that they're reaching since they're just more powerful. So I feel like I've noticed when maybe their ringer driver gets in, there's a really big gap between their ringer driver and maybe whoever's their slowest driver. Whereas some of these, some of the Miatas are arrowed out E30s. It seems like no matter who's in the car, they're able to do kind of close lap times. But I don't know, that there could be a lot there again, just how the car was set up and
Right. Well, and that's all AMs compared to AMs, right? And then again about the learning tool thing too, right? Like, I think you'll see a lot of people in slow cars get closer to the faster person on their team's lap time than in the fast car. Like, you'll see better driver progression throughout the weekend. So, maybe comparing Saturday morning isn't the same as comparing Sunday evening. And some of that comes down to, you mentioned being smooth on throttle application and whatnot. If you're in the GWR E30, which I think those guys did a fantastic job of making that car very easy to drive. And that was their goal, right? You can make the car a little faster, but it'll be more on edge. Whereas if you make it easy for anybody who's renting to get in and put down a good lap time, honestly, I think that's a good champ car strategy. But
yeah.
I digress. When your hair's not on fire, right? You're not an amateur in a car that has more power and less weight than you're used to, right? You're not in the Riley Corvette or anything, right? You go through a very simple corner, let's just say, for the example, right? You go through 11-inch Ingerman, right? It's like a 90-degree right-hander, flat, easy. You go through and you end up sort of in the middle of the track, just letting the car do what it needs to. Oh shit, that could have gone faster. Whereas if you're, you had too low of a corner speed in a faster car, right? So the car could have gone through the corner faster, but because you're maybe not as smooth getting off the brakes or onto the throttle, back end steps out, maybe just a little bit, you save it. Maybe you're near the edge of the track now. You don't know what the fuck's going on, right? So that's, I feel like we've really left the argument of what a momentum car is, but I guess that's why slow cars are good learning tools.
Yeah, so I guess going back to the momentum car thing, I guess to kind of wrap that all up, we've come to an agreement here that it's a relative term. If all the cars on track are all Miatas, then I guess that's when you you can say the 1.6 spec Miata is the momentum car, and the 1.899 NA1 car is the
power car.
But but the gap margins here are super tiny now. So it's relative. And then if on a global scale, you take every car ever made, and maybe not ever made, because then you have really old cars that might bump the Miata a little bit out of the whole momentum car
Since the
average.
90s maybe or something.
Yeah, you look at like 80s, 90s, and up, then yeah, you take all those cars, put them all together. You have like the Miata, Lotus Elise, like key, K cars from Japan, and on one side, but on average, they're mostly going to be momentum cars. Whereas, yeah, you take your Rolls Royce Ghost or Flying Spur Phantom, whatever, and your Mustang and your Challenger Hellcat, those guys go all the way on the left side.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I can agree with you there. Like, but still, I mean, you take a Hellcat and then you take a Bentley Continental GT, Super Sport or whatever. Like, okay, now the Hellcat's the momentum car in this situation. So I don't.
Is it?
It's maybe, I don't know. I guess the Super Sport, I don't know exactly how much horsepower. It's heavier. The Bentley's definitely heavier. I don't know. Like, they're both really heavy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's when it, I guess, starts to get difficult to compare. But it's maybe there's the apex predator of power cars. I don't know, like a Bentley, or not Bentley, Bugatti Chiron. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Versus, and then I don't know, there's
Versus a
probably
Miata.
some tiny, not even, I guess, yeah, if we do the cutoff in the 90s, even then you could probably find a tiny little like smart car or something that's more momentum car-y. But anyway, I think I agree. I think we came to agreement here. It's relative, but Miata is more often than not going to be the momentum car in the situation.
Yeah.
But
I guess we talked about tire loading a little bit, and since we're talking about stupid arguments, wider tires. What do they do? Are they worth it?
Wider tires. You know what? I think in a lot of situations they are worth it. You can definitely go too big though.
So I think the argument, I'm trying to remember the argument we had, another one we had at Pratt, going back and forth. And it was about something to do with tire pressure and wider tires. And some people were saying you don't get anything from it. So here's...
Oh, yeah, because, they were arguing that, like, like the tire... I don't know. If you use the same tire pressure on a wide tire versus not wide tire, that because the weight of the car is the same, the contact patch will be the same.
That's true, though, right? So here's... again, I guess I don't remember exactly the argument, so now I'm just rambling and it sounds kind of stupid. But the concept was, or to me is, if you have two tires, one's wider than the other, but all else is the same. And that's very key here, all else being the same. And then on cars of the same weight, same tire pressure, you change the shape of the contact patch, but that tire, again, all else being the same, and with constant tire pressure, is a spring. If your vehicle weight hasn't changed, that the amount it compresses that spring is also the same. Same but different. There'll be a different shape because the wider tire is wider, but your contact patch area will be the same. And that's my argument. The thing to note, though, is that it's not the same, because with the wider tire, generally what you're trying to do is be able to use a lower pressure for the same or a similar vertical rate, and then now it's not the same, I guess, right?
Yeah, so if you switch to the wider tire, it also has more, thermal capacity. So if normally running at lower pressures will increase that tire temperature.
Yes.
So by going to the wider tire, you now can run a lower pressure without overheating the tire, and then potentially have more grip. So, but there's so much to it, because in everything being the same argument, you're also saying the tire compound is the same, and so
Yeah.
it starts to it's
It's entirely just mental masturbation of like, okay, now
yeah
you're just changing the aspect, or not. I was going to say aspect ratio, but because that's already a phrase commonly used in tires, it's not here. The form factor. You're changing the form factor, I guess, but pretending it's the exact same tire otherwise, which doesn't exist in the wild as far as I'm aware. But
yeah
it's a fun thing to talk about and discuss.
yeah. I mean, you're also assuming that contact patch equals lap time. Like, that's the only thing that matters for lap time. If that's the case, then just drive with a flat tire, because that has the greatest contact patch
True.
possible. But I don't think that might not go well for you. I mean, you can try it. I wouldn't, don't try this at home, kids, kind of thing. But then, yeah, I mean, it'll have the largest contact patch. But there's so much that goes into it: sidewall stiffness, quartering stiffness, yeah, compound temperatures, the camber of the car, the camber curve. It's just there's a lot that goes into it, and
That's
I
not
think
all else being the same, though.
yeah, I know. All else being the same, sure. If you're driving in a straight line, not spinning the tires, yeah, you're probably gonna, you're gonna actually lose in that case with the wider tire, because you have more drag now.
And more rolling
But
resistance.
yeah, so, but I always thought it was kind of an annoying argument that would be had, because, like, I agree, the contact patch will be the same at the same pressure, because it's just the same force, force reaction with the ground. But yeah, there's so much more to it, and I think if we kind of bring it back to an endurance racing scenario, I have found that the wider tire usually helps, because at least if it doesn't give you more lap time, it'll give you more longevity in the tire, which again will also help.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was another kind of, it was almost more like a riddle, or like a brain
Yeah, exactly.
twister.
It's a fun thing to discuss. It's not really realistic because again, that these two tires in our minds don't exist to
Yeah.
compare. But it's just fun.
Yep.
It goes back to I
Yeah.
guess tire fundamentals. So
Yep. Yeah. So I guess one thing that does annoy me, though, is just when, I mean, one example would be the Toyota, the latest Toyota Supra. Not picking it because not picking it because I work for Toyota, but more because it's been a polarizing subject in the automotive community.
yes,
But everyone's just saying, oh, it's just a BMW. It's just a BMW. It's just a Z4.
is it though?
I mean, if it was, then it would be a Z4, because you can just buy a Z4. I mean, they're different cars. But I agree, they're both manufactured by it's Magna Steyr or whatever. I can't remember the Austrian plant that does it, but they're both manufactured in the same place. They were, whereas the Z4, I mean, the platform was a joint venture between Toyota and BMW. But yeah, I mean, it just starts to get to what is a car? What is it? These are brands. What makes a car a car?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you identify cars as different brands. I mean, it's a good way to identify them. But I mean,
Yeah, I mean, brands for the most part in today's world are just logistics companies, right?
yeah, I mean, they take, there's very few things that the OEs will do all themselves. I mean, the major things are kind of body structures, chassis monocoques, or uh, uh, just any sort of body structure and crash design, crash testing and designing, and that's done for the most part in house. And then a lot of times engines are usually done in-house. Depends. I mean, in some cases, you can have a different brand engine in another car, but usually it's the major manufacturers that are going to be designing those from scratch, and a lot of times manufacture themselves. I mean, parts of the engine won't be done. Like, the pistons will be from Mahle, and the rods will be from Mahle too. Maybe like it's just
Yeah.
there'll still be suppliers for certain parts in the engine, but maybe the overall design is more OE based than other things. Whereas, like the fancy little radar sensors on the front of every car now that can do radar cruise control, that's just done by like Continental or whatever sensor maker that they buy. And then of course they do their own programming to make them work, but there's a lot of suppliers. They're sourcing from these suppliers and putting it all together into one thing and selling it. So,
but dude, 2JZ, and now you got this thing.
Yeah, the 2JZ can never be beaten. It's the greatest engine ever. I mean, it's a great engine. If you want to make 1,000 horsepower on an engine with
Buy an
you
LS.
still have to modify it.
Yeah, that's the thing is you have to, like, the people who make those high horsepower builds modify it, and again, it's Yamaha worked on it, so I mean, is the Mark IV Supra a Yamaha? No, but I guess does another company working on an engine, even if it's just part of it, invalidate it? But also, like, yeah, dude, I mean, if you're replacing the bottom end of your 2JZ, I can do that with an LS7 too. Make a shit ton of power, right? I'll turbo that. I don't know. I guess I don't understand the minus the fact that Brian Earl Spillner drove one and it was legit. I don't really understand otherwise.
Yeah. A quick sidebar. It's disappointing that he never raced it in Race Wars. Like, he brought it there, they built it for Race Wars, and then maybe he did and they just didn't show it on screen, but he could have won some sick pink slips with that thing.
I think, well, I don't know at all, but I'm just going to go ahead and say he was planning on racing it and they got in the fight because, Johnny Tran's out there calling people narcs and them's fighting words, boy.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and then they went to go bust a truck up again. So,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Life happens.
Anyway.
You got to rob trucks. It's whatever.
That's what we do when you're a family, right?
Yeah. We're a family.
But, I mean, going back specifically to 2JZ, I think when you break it all down, the reason why it's so kind of, I guess, legendary is it kind of mostly comes down to the block. Of course, and there's a lot of things that bolt to it, but I mean, the block itself, there's some cool videos online you can watch where people are comparing like the 2JZ block to the RB26 that's in the R32 to R34 GTR in one way or another. And just comparing those two blocks, I mean, obviously the 2JZ has more displacement, but just comparing the two block for block, like 2JZ has more cylinder wall thickness. It has a higher deck thickness and larger bearing journal. So it's like, it's beefed out. It's a beefcake. I mean, the impressive part though is also, if you just weigh the two blocks though, with all those differences, the 2JZ is still lighter than the RB block. So it's, in this case, just Toyota did a better job than Nissan in designing a block. Now, honestly, I would say that they probably could have made it so much lighter, because if this block survives at 2,000 horsepower, it probably didn't need.
Like, are those people not filling their blocks with cement and shit? Does the stock block actually last for that?
I mean, they're probably filling it at that point, but I think
they're not billing,
again, like,
at least.
maybe you can do one pass down the drag strip, without, right? Like, there's a lot of things where people will, it's stock block, stock bottom end, whatever. They'll have the record, but like, the next pass they try, it blows up. So like, it does become a reliability thing. And that's part of the reason why the 2JZ block is so strong is because they factor in, you know, a lot of you know, cycles, and it's very reliable. It's going to last a long time at the stock power level, or it'll last some time at a very, very high power level. So
Right. Well, and some of it also comes from that architecture too, right? I think we've discussed it before, but when you talk about in a straight six, you compare the number of cylinders to the number of bearings, and then compare that to a V8. You know, I mean, yeah, it's just that ratio specifically for distributing load is better, right?
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think a lot of this. I mean, a lot of it's the nostalgia of these older cars that people they almost just want Toyota to make the Mark IV Supra again so they can buy it at not like 50 grand used
Yeah.
like they are now priced. And then we, you know, with Apple CarPlay and everything right in, you know, from the get-go. But
Mm-hmm.
so like I understand that perspective, but like I don't know. I would say that the new Supra is basically better in every way than a stock Mark IV Supra. Like on many levels, handling, I mean, power, fuel economy, um, you know, comfort, livability. It's got all the nice interior features. Like I don't know, it's similar to the Supra as far as the interior is. My '99 Eclipse, I sit in that thing and it's just super plasticky and creaky. I don't know. It's like it's not like the interior is anything to be super impressed by. But
Right.
I mean that was the character of the cars though back then. It was kind of don't to worry too much about interior quality. Just put it all into the drivetrain and making it fast and affordable, which again I'm perfectly fine with. But I don't know. I think it's just a lot of people that they wanted a Mark V Supra that was just a Mark IV with some updated trimmings and stuff. But what they got was this BMW abomination. But
I mean, has anybody like really pushed that engine yet either? Like it's still, if it's got the same layout, you know, obviously they're, as technology improves, you can simulate what you're going to have real world a lot closer, or a lot better. So then they're not going to leave as much margin in. So that's definitely a factor, but you know, I mean, has anybody really pushed that engine yet? Like people are complaining about with how much power it came with stock. Well, I mean, the fucking Supra Mark IV came with zero power stock, right? It's like 330 or something.
it
So
was like I think it was around 300, maybe 320. But yeah, I mean the latest Supra with the update, they did an update to the engine. It makes I think 360 or 380 or something. So and way more torque too. Um,
doesn't matter.
but it doesn't matter. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. The argument I like to make when talking this whole oh it's not a Supra, it's not a Toyota is for one, if Toyota just took the LC, the LC, yeah, right? Yeah, the LC, so they're the big Lexus rear wheel drive GT car, which is, you know, the Supra's kind of a GT car style car, higher power, bigger engine, not the greatest handling, but you know, good in a straight line and everything. So it's similar stuff. If they took the LC and then you know, and then put a Toyota badge on instead, and you know, maybe they take out some of the sound deadening, all the fancy, you know, sound deadening stuff down, you make the interior Toyota interior to, you know, kind of cheapen and everything, and then sold it for 50 grand and said, hey, look, this V6 twin turbo, or and there's a V8 option too. This is the Mark IV or Mark V Supra. I feel like that would be less related than this, you know, BMW joint venture that has a straight six turbo rear wheel drive 2-seater. I guess it's a little different that it's not a 2+2 anymore, but it's still it's I'd say it's more of a Supra than if they did you know, did what I said, it modified something they had existing, because they don't have any. Toyota doesn't sell a straight six engine anymore, at least in commercial, regular cars, passenger cars. And maybe they have some commercial thing in Japan that I don't know about, but it's all V6s, maybe turbo. They have the turbo V6 in the LS.
Mm-hmm.
They have, they have some V8s, the V8 that's in the LC. So I don't know. It just gets to the point where would that been, I mean, yes, it would be a Toyota then, at least more, I guess, all in-house Toyota, but I don't know if it would really be a Supra. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah.
And I guess my other take is if BMW didn't come in and they didn't work on this together with Toyota, it probably would never have just been, there just would not be a Mark V Supra. So
Right.
it's, if it didn't exist, then no one would have anything to complain about, but they also wouldn't have a sweet car to drive.
Yeah.
So,
They just wouldn't have anything.
yeah, but I mean this argument can be kind of said for there's a lot of cars. There's the FRS, BRZ, I guess
86.
RIP FRS, but
Yeah.
86 now. Those cars, I don't think they like so my understanding of those cars is it's actually a lot more Subaru than Toyota for those.
Yeah, I mean, they're fucking boxer engine, right?
Exactly. And so people are, I mean, I don't really see people saying, "Oh, that's that Toyota GT86. It's just a Subaru. I hate that." I don't know. I don't.
Well, just to interject real quick, I feel like the people who complain most about the Mark V Supra are JDM people. So they don't really give a fuck if it's a Subaru. They're just mad that the Germans worked on it. They don't really care that it's, BMW.
Yeah.
It's not Japanese, bro. JDM.
Yeah.
Life. Spelled with a Y.
Yeah, I mean it's different for sure. But I don't know. I still think they're pretty sweet cars. I haven't driven one yet, but I'd love to drive one at some point. I mean,
Yeah, it'd be fun.
The way I look at it is it's a BMW that you can go to a Toyota dealership to buy and maintain. Although actually I think they probably send you off to the BMW dealership when you service it. But I don't know. It's just if it has that Toyota reliability that everyone looks for in a BMW, I don't know. That seems like
It seems like a win-win to me.
a win-win. Of course, it's still very much BMW. So I guess we'll have to see. But since it was jointly done, Toyota had a say in everything. So
Yeah.
if some reliability numbers weren't up to par, then I'm sure they'd say something. Of course, I work for Toyota, but I don't know any of these inner workings since that project was not done in North America. But it'll be. I mean, I guess we'll have to see about the reliability side. But I don't know. It's a car that might not have existed if two companies didn't come together and make a plan to make this car. Maybe the Z4 wouldn't have had another generation if it wasn't for this. So
Right. Yeah. Just splitting costs, however they did it. Might have been the end of, well, maybe not. Wouldn't be the end of the Supra. It just wouldn't have continued. And then it might have been the end of the Z4.
yeah.
So
Yeah, it's just there's so many cars. I mean, there's even the gray imports of the 90s, your Eagle Talons that are just Mitsubishi Eclipses and Dodge Stealths and Mitsubishi 3000 GTs. Like those are straight up just rebadged. But
yeah, well, that whole Dodge Mitsubishi thing is, there's a lot of cars between those two where they're just same.
yeah,
You know,
it's interesting for sure.
Plymouth
that
Lasers.
was. Yeah, that was in the time period where Mitsubishi was limited in their imports because of, government regulations. And at the time they were still working on trying to build factories in the US. So as a as a workaround, they did these gray imports where they just send a bunch of cars over. At least not in the Eclipse. For the Eclipse, those were actually made in the U.S. Whereas, like, for example, Chrysler Conquest, Mitsubishi Starion, like cars like that, they were just shipped over with no badges on. Chrysler just pops one on there, and this is a Chrysler. So then, they're basically Chrysler's buying Mitsubishis and then selling them as Chryslers in order to allow Mitsubishi to send more cars over. So that's a whole different thing. Whereas I think, in the case of the Supra, it's more two companies helping split costs. Same with Subaru and Toyota.
Yeah,
because sports cars can be expensive to develop, and they don't sell as well as a crossover nowadays.
No, they don't. Yeah, you gotta have that CUV, dude. It's all the rage.
Yeah, like people complain about the Porsche Cayenne. It dilutes the brand, and what's the smaller SUV now, Macan or something? Megane. They have all these big Porsches. It's like, it should just be 911s. But if it wasn't for those cars, they probably would have gone out of business potentially.
Yeah, I mean, they make a shitload of money, right? They wouldn't have all these other cars that they sell.
So, yeah, it's just another one of those arguments that you see on the interwebs and comment sections of Facebooks and Jalopniks and Car and Driver, and just it's if you just ignore most of the facts, I guess you can make kind of dumb arguments. I think that's really for anything.
Yeah, just ignore the facts and you're fine. You're good.
So, well, I think that's kind of all of our rants for the day.
Yeah, it's a holiday and we've been chatting for a minute, so
so this is more of a ranty argument kind of podcast. Of course we're still going to do more tech focused. I mean, we threw some tech bits
very
in
little,
there,
but in the future you'll get some more. So
I mean, we're still going to keep doing tech ones, maybe more kind of racing news related. So but let us know if you like this style. You can hit us up on the Facebooks, Motorsports Tech Talk, and Instagram at Motorsports Tech Talk, or just listen. As long as you keep downloading these episodes, I guess if the ones that get downloaded most are the ones we see as the most popular. So yeah.
I mean, we look at what you download, but obviously you can reach out and hey, if you're listening to this one and you have strong opinions about either the Supra, go ahead and tell us. Reach out and just post on our Facebook page. Tell us how we're wrong. Yeah. Or if you don't think the Miata is a momentum car, feel free to reach out and tell us why you're wrong. Because you are. Because it is. So.
Yeah. So, yeah. As always, thanks again for listening and making it through another one. So we hope you keep listening in, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.
See ya.